All right, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith, and I am a black belt in Isshinryu Karate and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I'm also a brown belt in Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the question comes up because I saw it in another man's Bunkai video for Isshinryu Karate. For people who point out the fact that I don't train anymore, you try training after you've had 4 strokes and see how easy that goes about doing. Of course, I don't look like I train anymore because I've been medically disabled for the past 13 years. I've had 4 strokes or mini strokes, transischemic attacks in the past 13 years. So that's why I don't look like I train, but I used to kick ass, and I probably still can kick ass. I've just not been in a fight recently. But anyway, the question is, why do we have a circle block for the middle block in Isshinryu Karate? It can be both an open hand block or a closed hand block, when we already know the Isshinryu straight punch is going to beat that. There's more than one reason to have it. First of all, unskilled attackers hardly ever use straight punches. Real world crime statistics show that unskilled attackers usually attack with the right overhand hammer fist, which either a Isshinryu high block or an Isshinryu middle block will stop that in time to keep you from getting hit. So even if you were looking at the circle block, well, the circle block's never going to work against a straight punch. I don't think it's meant to work against a straight punch either, as this other gentleman was saying. Because circular motions in martial arts tend to be submission related, where you're applying small circle or large circle jiu-jitsu to somebody. All right. So, and as he pointed out, another thing that he pointed out, the stacking of hands when you're doing your basic blocks. Why do we stack our hands between reps? Somebody might say, well, that's a useless movement. Well, not really, because when you do the block and then you stack your hands back over here, what's actually happened is you've trapped the person's hand, and then you're stacking it to your waist where you can keep it at your center of gravity and apply and potentially grip it in your other hand as well and apply side arm control. Now, before anybody says, well, you're never going to get side arm control against a skilled opponent. So what? Unless you're a pro fighter, which I should have gone pro when I was younger, but unless you're a pro fighter, we don't really care that it's not going to work against a black belt, because we already know that a black belt versus black belt, you're rarely going to get side arm control. All right. So I understand that. It does happen, but it's going to be pretty rare. But in a street fight where hopefully not everybody knows how to fight a black belt. All right. So in a street fight, we can get side arm control because our attacker is usually going to be unskilled or poorly skilled at best. And then you may say, well, just like the Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu argument, the detractor toward Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu is going to say, well, in the real life, nobody's going to throw that reckless of an attack. Actually, yes, they do. I've been in a couple street fights in real self-defense situations, and unskilled attackers almost always throw a reckless right overhand haymaker to start the fight, and they end up totally off balance, and a skilled attacker will beat them in one hit. I know, because the last time I got in a fight, whenever I was in school, for example, not as an adult, but whenever I was in school, the last fight I was actually in was in the 8th grade, and the idiot threw a right overhand haymaker at me, and I caught him and wrist locked him. I counterattacked him in the solar plexus and face with punches, and then I threw him using an Aikido throw, and he hit the gravel, and he didn't get up. So there were actually 4 punches. He threw 2 at me. The first one hit me, and as soon as I realized I needed to defend myself, the second one was also a right overhand, and that's when I caught him in I actually used the middle block, but you have plenty of time to use a middle block whenever they throw a right overhand, because it's the slowest attack to evolve on a human body other than a spinning back kick. And so I used the circular grab and hook and put him in a joint lock over here, and I punched him to the solar plexus and then to the face, and then I grabbed in under his arm and did a full step in and throw over the shoulder, like the ippon throw that comes from judo and aikido. There would be a full ippon in the competition judo, is what I did to him, and he hit the gravel and didn't get up. And that was the end of the fight. That was the last time I had to defend myself in school or college. I've been in a couple fights as an adult, and put it this way, the only reason I lost the fight that I lost as an adult is because there were 2 cops attacking me, and they were placing me under unlawful arrest, and they both maced and tased me, and I didn't do anything wrong. And the only reason they beat me is because they had a taser, because the mace alone wouldn't have stopped me. But and they had to drop all the charges because it was an unlawful arrest. They had nothing against me. All right, so where was I? When your attack comes in, yes, it takes too long to middle block a circular motion to block. You should actually inside parry a straight punch and step out of the way at the same time, either stepping cross stance behind with your back foot or stepping sideways with your lead foot and dragging your back foot back into another stance. But you're going to inside parry, and then that's going to give you sidearm control, strangely enough, even against a decent fighter. And then you can lead by grabbing their arm. Their other weapon is at distance now, so they can't really reach you with their other weapon. Then you've got control of their arm, and you can back fist them or hammer fist them in the face at will or apply knee strikes. All right. But if you're going to get sidearm control, you're actually going to get sidearm control with this, an inside parry and stepping aside, rather than an outside middle block that also does like a windmill block. But what is a windmill block if it's not a block? Because we say in Isshinryu Karate that there, in fact, are no dedicated strikes and no dedicated blocks in Isshinryu Karate. That every strike can be a block and every block can be a strike. So what is a windmill block if we're pretty sure it's actually not a block? Then what is it? What is this motion? It's an inside parry, and it's sidearm control here, and followed by a back fist and a knee strike. Okay, so windmill block is an inside parry, grab the arm, their other weapon, they're going to be off balance like this, and their other weapon is way over here. They can't possibly reach far enough to attack with the other weapon. They say, why is it in demonstration speed the other partner never counterattacks? The answer is he can't counterattack at full speed either, because he's off balance. Once you get his arm, he's off balance, and his other weapon is separated by the full width of his shoulder. Your hands doesn't reach much farther than your own shoulder width across your own body. So see how inferior this position is for him. His hand can't reach any farther than my sleeve of my shirt, whereas my hands are here and here down the arm. So he can't even reach my body. He can't reach his own hand even, and he certainly can't reach my other hand. It's got the grip on him now at the wrist. So the argument that the partner just goes along with it, no, they don't. We tell them to resist, but you can't resist because the pain on your elbow and wrist gets so high in your shoulder that you have to go with it anyway. All right, it's the first problem for the original attacker. The second problem is the person cannot reach that far across their body, no matter what they do, to try to reach their own elbow to stop the pressure. And anything else they try to do, such as countering by trying to sweep your leg, they're going to be off balance too. They're going to be more off balance trying to sweep you. And then, by the way, while I'm mentioning the sweep, so this is what is the real windmill block? It's a inside parry, hand off the wrist and elbow to the other arm, pin it to your own waist, and then you can do things like sweep their leg if you need to, besides just the back fist and knee strike. You can sweep their leg or step on the back of their knee. Let me show you this. If I get it up on the camera. In the back of your knee, there's a pressure point right here that you can hit either with your fingers or you can stand on the pressure point. And I've never seen anyone in MMA do this, but I think standing on your opponent is banned under the current rules. But you can stand on the back of this pressure point with your heel in the back of their knee, and they're going to be pinned to the ground, and they're going to be trying to tap out or else holding it for all they got to try to keep from tapping out, and they're not going to be able to think straight. And at that point, you're going to be able to do things like apply a reverse neck breaker or a guillotine or a rear naked choke to them, depending on where your body position ends up compared to their body position, depending on where you are oriented with their body. Hopefully, you'll be behind them and able to go for either a reverse neck breaker or a rear naked choke, which reverse neck breaker is banned as a neck crank in MMA. So don't tell me I don't know my stuff. I know how to street fight and I know street self-defense. In street self-defense, a reverse neck breaker is preferred because we're going to finish the person off in case there's a second or third attacker, certainly if we already know there's a second or third attacker. If it's one-on-one, we're not going to use a reverse neck breaker because we're not going to use lethal force or near lethal force against one attacker. But if there's two or three of them and we don't know their full intention beyond just robbing us or beating the hell out of us, they might be out to kill us, then we're certainly going to escalate to lethal force when we're outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1 armed. Because are you just going to stand there and get killed, or are you going to try to fight back? Like I tell these far left Democrats on Quora, you got two basic choices in any self-defense situation, because they want to know what gives you a right to take somebody's life in self-defense or defense of your property. I said you can either stand there and let them beat the hell out of you, or you can fight back. No, it's your choice. You can stand there and let the bad guy win, or you can do the right thing, which is to beat the bad guy. All right. Also, let me dispel a myth about Bunkai. Where does Bunkai come from? It's been handed down for several hundred to potentially thousands of years, the real Bunkai. I'm not talking about bullshit, and I'm also not talking about a 2-finger poke in the eyes, even though we do poke in the eyes. When we practice eye gouges in martial arts as a basic attack, it was a 5-finger eye gouge. And you are, in fact, leading with those 2 fingers, although you might be better trained to lead with the thumb and the forefinger, because the thumb is stronger than the middle finger. But anyway, you lead with those 2 fingers, but you use all 5 fingers spread about eye width apart to maximize the chances that at least one of your fingers goes in one of their eyes. We're not doing the Three Stooges eye poke, okay? But that is actually practiced as one of the 15 basic hand techniques in Isshinryu Karate, is a 5-finger eye gouge. That we know that works, by the way, from real street fights and self-defense situations. So where does the Bunkai come from if it's not just random? Because the guy was trying to say that it was either secret or that people don't know it and they just relearn it or whatever. And I was like, no, we don't. We go to 2 hours a day of class, and an hour of it every day is actually Bunkai training. It's been handed down for several hundred years, at least. And we know that Naihanchi kata is one of the oldest katas out of the 80-something that they actually do at the Olympics. Naihanchi is allowed, but nobody does it because it's not very flashy. It's a pretty short kata, and it's not very flashy. But Naihanchi is actually one of the oldest known katas that's still taught exactly the same as it's always been taught. And there's a lot of good Bunkai in Naihanchi, a lot of good street self-defense. I personally like the belief that you're fighting 3 attackers with your back against a wall so a 4th attacker can't sneak up on you. Now, if they were skilled attackers, quote unquote, there would be no way to beat 3 people. I don't think, I mean, I used to be pretty badass and could actually beat 2 second-degree black belts attacking me full power in full contact handicap matches. But that's because I was just abnormal. I should have gone pro as a fighter, and I didn't. In hindsight, I would have had a much better life for the first half of my life anyway, had I gone full-time professional fighting, because I started getting sick when I was about 24, 25 years old. I was certainly full-time sick by 25, but I think the symptoms started around 24 years old. But I didn't become medically disabled until 2012, 2013, somewhere in that range. But the first half of my life would have been much better had I gone into full contact fighting, because I was that good at it. So what I'm telling you works. And the real mid block does work, by the way. And the other issue is it's not even an issue, because when you're really a trained fighter, what are you doing? You're going to be in a standing guard, right? Your body's going to be about a 45-degree angle from your opponent. Your left foot's going to be slightly forward. Your right foot's going to be a little bit wide, maybe shoulder width to shoulder width and a half wide. You're about a foot staggered between your feet, all right? So your shoulders are turned 45-degree angle. And what do you got? You got a standing guard. Your front hand and arm are already in middle block position from here, aren't they? See where my shoulder is lined up with my fist? So that's really not even an issue in a real fight, except maybe on the first strike thrown. So I know where my opponent is in a real fight, and to middle block them, I've only got to do that. Now, did you see how little I had to move my arm just to totally intercept their attack? about 2 or 3 inches. Now, when you're taught blocks, they teach it that way for a reason, because that's actually the submission version of the block rather than the actual block. But again, in a real fight, once I've got my standing guard up to chin level, I'm not doing a looping block. I'm only moving my hand 2 or 3 inches, aren't I? So that's not even an issue. See that? And by the way, doing this, what they do in MMA and especially in bare knuckle fighting, does not protect your head. It's a basic rule of physics. If your hand gets hit here by a full power punch, about 100% of the energy is going to transfer into your brain. So do not brace your hands off of your head when you block in a bare knuckle fight. That is stupid. That does not work. You're going to get hurt. You want to intercept the punch out here and let the spring action of your arm absorb the energy. You're not going to block with one bone like Shotokan, and even they don't actually use it that way in real fights. So I don't know why they practice it that way, other than Shotokan has always practiced it that way. You're not going to do a single bone block like Shotokan that way or that way. You'll break your own arm, especially if you try blocking a kick. You're going to do a meat of the arm with both bones aligned is how you're going to block an incoming punch or kick. And again, if I've got my standing guard correct, see, a standing guard, they don't tell you, no untrained fighters don't know all this, all right? So, left foot about a foot to a foot and a half in front of the right foot. Toes should be slightly inward, strangely, all right? And there's a good reason for this, all right? Feet between 1 shoulder width and 1.5 shoulder widths apart, all right? Body turn to a 45-degree angle. This narrows your solar plexus and certainly your liver, especially if we're fighting right-handed. We want to hide our liver from the opponent's side, because this is why one reason why fighting right-handed is probably superior to fighting left-handed almost all the time, even though you should learn to fight both ways so you can switch as necessary. But you want to hide your liver from your opponent, because your liver is one of your most vulnerable and easy to damage targets in a fight. And believe me, if you ever get hit full power in the liver, you're going straight down to the ground. All right. It's about as bad as a knockout to the head. You're going to hit your knees. All right. So body turn 45-degree angle, elbow protecting your ribs, especially your floater ribs, which are the most vulnerable. Hand chin to nose height. See that? Other hand protecting my ribs and chin high. Your straight punches are going to come from there, out and back. They don't come down here, even though we practice them from down here in basics. But again, that's because we're putting a submission on our opponent at the hips. But in the real fight, your straight punch comes from your shoulder. You twist your hips. See what I did there? You twist your hips and your shoulder into the straight punch, and then you come back. Same thing with your right cross. You're going to twist your hips and your ankle and your shoulder into the punch. Fully extend 2 to 4 inches beyond the surface of your target, not at the target, through the target. Then pull back to standing guard. Out, back. Now, that was, whatever, a quarter speed or something. All right. So, your bunkai, before you even get to bunkai, you got to learn basics. I see a lot of karate fighters, especially point sparrers, don't know this. When you in a real fight, I just said it though, but when you're in a real fight, you're not punching at the surface of your target. In point sparring, they get in trouble if they actually hit their opponent with any force. They get a point deducted. So they have to love tap their opponent and pull their punch. In a real fight, you want to punch 2 to 4 inches beyond the surface of your target. That way you're getting penetration. You want to kick about 6 to 8, maybe even 12 inches through your target so that you get full penetration. All right? So, for example, back in the 2020 Olympics, which actually took place in 2021, during one of the gold medal fights, the gentleman who eventually lost the fight knocked the other guy out with a kick because the other guy dropped his guard and stepped into the kick. So they gave an automatic loss to the man who would have won the street fight. Because I had just said, watch this, the other guy's fixing to get knocked out. He keeps dropping his hands and stepping into stuff. And sure enough, about 10 seconds later, pow, he got knocked out with a head kick. First of all, if you ever get hit in the head with a kick, you dropped your guard, and it's your own damn fault. Head kicks are almost always a bad idea unless the target is already bent over and making them a much easier target. because the head is the farthest vital target away from where your feet are, and your feet have to go all the way from the floor to the ceiling just about to hit somebody in the head. And we know from basic geometry and trigonometry that for every degree of rotation that you go above horizontal with a kick, you lose a little over 1% off the force of your kick. So even if your kick is 4 times stronger than a punch, which for a really well-trained fighter it should be, you're going to lose 90 to 95 to maybe even 100% of your force by the time your kick gets to head high. So it's not going to be very effective, which is why knockouts with head kicks are actually so rare, which is why, ironically, they make an inordinate number of highlight reels out of head kicks, because in real fights, they almost never happen. So when you watch highlight reels, you see head kicks all the time, but in reality, head kicks happen about 30 times less. Knockouts by head kicks happen about 30 times less than knockouts by punches or elbows. So if you keep that in mind, you should practice punches and elbows about 30 times more often than you should practice head kicks, because a head kick in a real fight is very rare. And if you miss the head kick, what happens? You end up with your back exposed to your opponent, which even a complete clown will take you out if you expose your back to them. I mean, they could be an untrained clown. If they hit you in the back of the head, you're done for. All right? So when you miss a head kick, what happens? Your momentum carries you through, and your stance is like this, and your opponent is back there. About the best thing you can do is try to get your guard back, and you might get a lucky back kickoff, but in reality, you're not. You're going to get punched in the temple or in the back of your head, or you're going to get your neck broke or whatever, depending on what your attacker has done. So is it Nat Hearns? He made a video of what things never to do in a street fight. And the first thing he pointed out was never throw a high head kick in a street fight. He said in a street fight, you want to kick the solar plexus or groin, was the first thing he did in his video. The second thing he did in this video is don't Jackie Chan your opponent. That does not work. All right. The second thing he pointed out is don't do stupid stuff like that in a street fight. He said throw a throat punch. All right. Is the other thing he did in this video. I agree with that. All right. And the third thing he did was don't try to throw a spinning back kick, even though it's the strongest strike that a human body can generate. He said never try to throw a spinning back kick. By the time you could have, if your opponent is so incompetent that you actually land a spinning back kick against them, you could have just took off and run away, or you could have beat them any other way with lower risk. Because a spinning back kick, you have to initiate. All right. First of all, the person must be at the range, which is strange because most of the time when you get attacked by somebody in a street fight, what are they going to do? They're going to do this a couple times, and if that doesn't work, they're going to try to tackle you straight to the ground. So there's a good chance they're within arm's range, which means they're already too close to actually spinning back kick, because they need to be about 1.5 feet farther away to get maximum power delivered from a spinning back kick, which is like your front foot needs to spin around to plant, and then your back foot has to kick through. I'm trying to do this in slow motion through the camera, which I could actually do even in as bad a shape as I'm in these days, because it's actually easier to do something full speed than it is to do it at slow speed. Because at slow speed, you have to maintain your balance and your tension better the entire time. And when you're, I'm admittedly, I'm weighing in this morning at 220, and I'm supposed to be 185, so I'm exactly 35 pounds overweight right now compared to my ideal weight, unfortunately. But so another common attack in a street self-defense situation is a simple push or a double lapel grab. And what do you do against that? You between the double lapel grab, you do this. You grab the back of their neck now, and you pull them down into a knee strike. Wham. That's the counter to a double lapel grab or a push, or a counter. It's the preferred counter because it's usually going to knock them right out. If you hit them in the nose or jaw or forehead or eye socket with your knee strike, when you're double clenching and pulling down, that's going to be the end of the fight, especially if you're actually trained brown or black belt level fighter, as I was in the year 2000. You're going to knock the person in the next week, and you may as well call an ambulance because they're going to need medical attention. Understand? So that's real bunkai. Real Bunkai, after you defeat your attacker, you may as well get out your cell phone and dial 911. Yes, I need 1 or 2 ambulances at this address right away. I was just attacked and I defended myself. All right. Do the villains the courtesy of calling the ambulance. Because if you use the real Isshinryu Karate Bunkai on them, they're going to need an ambulance. All right, I'm done with the video. Thank you.